I'm sorry?
Nicole Sprague.
Hi, Nicole.
Serving as your board
I
reporter.
haven't met you before. Nice to see you. Good.
Anyone else?
And board members?
I'm Julie Battaglia.
Yeah, Julie.
Miranda Douglas.
Kevin Laughlin.
All right. Mike Roman.
Wade Carlisle.
Dina Stanley.
Steve Voris.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. And, of course, Eric and Mike and
This is Bill Hodgson. He's our new Assistant Ops Manager.
hi, Bill. Good. Welcome. All right. So, with that, first item of business is the review and approval of the minutes from our last meeting 3 months ago. I hope everyone has read the minutes. Do we have any corrections or changes to the minutes?
No, I read them. I
Okay.
propose it.
Can we have a recommendation to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes from last month.
Second.
All right, second. All in favor? Aye? All right, terrific. Second item on the agenda is citizens to be heard regarding items not on the agenda, but I don't see anyone in the room, so I presume that we can move right through that. And new business items, if there are any items from the members of the board, we'll get to those later. So I think we can move right into old business items, starting with the Marina project update from Eric.
Morning, everybody. Eric Gandy, Marine and Aviation Director. I got a pretty decent list of things to go over with you guys, some significant topics to discuss and update you on, some exciting stuff going on. So I'll start with the Marina project update. I've spoken to you before about a huge obstacle to the progress of this project was the existence of a federal channel from 1960. So we had a tremendous amount of effort and correspondence between our congressional delegates in D.C. and through efforts of Charlie Crist, Marco Rubio, Rick Scott, and we've moved this forward to the extent that it's going to be included in the water bill, and upon the president's signature, that channel should be vacated. So that will allow us, we've put a pause on the project, and we paused the project because we didn't want to spend funds with the uncertainty before us. So that'll allow the design team to move the project forward to the extent that it will be able to go through 30% design and we'll move it along. The other thing that I mentioned, and I've mentioned to council, and let me pull this up here, just give me a moment, that I mentioned to council was, we didn't address the seawall in this project, and that component of the project was critical to us because we're going to do all the upland, we're doing the utilities and the water and the sewer, but we have an existing seawall that's over 50 years old. So council was supportive of doing this correctly and moving it forward, and at the same time they agreed to have us investigate the potential for a parking garage at the location. This does a lot of things for us in terms of addressing the needs of the commercial fleet, because with the redesign, we were going with an all-floating dock system because we had to have floating docks offset from the seawall in order to address the seawall years later. This go-ahead from council has allowed us to attack the seawall problem, come back in with timber docks for the commercial fleet, which is desirable for them and desirable for my staff because we can fix them when they get broken. And it also allows for the pursuit of a parking garage at the location, because what happens is when we rebuild this thing, none of the overwater storage is allowed anymore. None of that stuff's permissible. So our thought process was, well, if we lose parking spaces to the redesign anyway, could we give some back in the form of a parking garage and use the ground level for a permissible use, which is storage for the commercial fleet. So it's really a win-win all the way around if we can pull that component off. But the very positive news is the ability to address the seawall and the federal channel component. And I must say, I corresponded with him after the fact that, so Charlie Chris was involved early on. He got us a meeting with the Corps of Engineers. Rick Scott and Marco Rubio were supportive, but a tremendous amount of support came from our own Gus Bilirakis. And I think he was really heavily involved in moving this thing along. So I corresponded with him after the fact and thanked him for his support. And he's definitely hometown guy and knows the importance and knows that facility. So excited about all of it. The timing of it will just be upon the president's signature, and we should be able to vacate a small portion of that federal channel, which good news to me is the Corps of Engineer won't tell me I have an illegal marina anymore. So some exciting stuff there is going to really move this thing along.
Can I ask a question, Eric?
Yeah.
Is there any idea when, you said a water bill, is there any idea when that water bill is likely to move?
I'm not sure the timetable, but within the next month or so. I don't
Okay.
think it will. I think it will take place relatively quickly, despite the fact that we have a new Congress coming in January. I think this will move relatively quickly based on what our lobbyist has indicated. So got my fingers crossed, but it's in there, and we relate to the party, and through the efforts of our representatives, we really, and senators, we really got fortunate that they were able to incorporate it into this existing bill that had already made it through both sides. So big deal. Big deal for us, and it was an obstacle that gave us pause because those water bills are on even years, so we would have had to wait till 24 to try and get it in. So big deal. Any more questions about that one?
So all the docks are going to be post docks now, or just that?
So the commercial fleet that runs around the perimeter,
Along
about
the
50
perimeter.
or so slips, yes, those will be timbered construction. The remaining docks, which are all the recreational fleet and the transient slips, will all be floating concrete.
And the fuel dock too?
Yeah, fuel dock too. There's some advantages to that.
Yeah, I've pulled up
Loading,
that fuel dock at
offloading,
low tide,
and
yeah.
then most significantly, the resiliency issue, because we have periods of time in a big full moon tide where we have to turn the power off because it goes underwater.
It's so high. Yeah.
So that will, rise with the significant tides we have, and in the event of a surge event, we have a lot more latitude, with that floating system. So, but yeah, we're going to proceed to 30% design and move it along then, and then simultaneously, engineering and the parking division are going to be looking at the prospects of a parking garage at the location.
That parking garage be a separate budget?
Yeah, separate project. We've got council authorization to kind of, do the research, look at some pro formas, look at what it would take to build something like that there. There's some challenges, the water table's high. We're grandfathered in for stormwater stuff now. If you build a new structure, you have to deal with stormwater and permitting. And so there are some challenges, but those are the kind of things they're going to try and work through and figure out the feasibility of putting a parking garage there. Not the first time it's come up. I recall in 15, 16, it came up once before. There were some conversations about it, but it didn't go anywhere. So for me, it's a need we have out there. We have a volume versus capacity issue at that marina, and we're frequently at peak times that lot is overflowing. Coupled with the fact that this project, we're going to lose about 40 spaces to make this project work, because we had to give the commercial fleet points of sale, little kiosks. Well, when we do that upland, we eat into the parking spaces. So we're giving them something, but taking a little away in the terms of parking. So, I'm hopeful. And then the storage issue is huge. Storage, ice, supplies. Right now, many of them have overwater structures, storage, which is none of which is permissible. But that was last done in the 70s. So it just, things have changed.
Do you have any sense of does the garage have to be done after the marina, at the same time, or
So-
beforehand?
So the ask is to have the design teams coordinate. So when we're talking about the preliminary design for a parking garage and investigating all this, how would this work? The marina will obviously come first. This project's been long awaited. We've been moving it forward, so it's.
That was really the thrust, sorry to interrupt, that was really what was in my mind, do we have to wait for a
No,
garage
no.
to get finished before we do this
No,
first?
we're well ahead on the marina project.
Good.
Compared to any kind of contemplation about a garage. At least we're contemplating it, and we're doing some preliminary design and research necessary to determine if it's feasible or not. For me, for selfish reasons, it would be a win-win all the way around. It would give, our clients and our tenants better access, more parking options, and the storage issue is huge for the commercial fleet because we are effectively taking the vast majority of it away because it's not permissible anymore. So ice machines over water, all kinds of things like that, that they need to do business every day. Now, have they done it before without those things? Yes, but they've been doing it this way for a long time now. So, my desire would be to give that back in some capacity vis-a-vis a parking structure with ground level storage and things like that. So we'll see. Got my fingers crossed on that one. But certainly the priority for me and my department is moving the marina forward because it is so antiquated. I keep a rusted, 18-inch bolt in my office to show people, the conditions we're dealing with. And the thing was once the 3/4 inch in diameter. It's the size of a pencil now. It's just 1970s, but the original structure was in the 50s. So good stuff. Exciting news over the Federal Channel. That was hanging over our head. So Stevenson's Creek, the wake zone update. So I went to council. I think I've explained the process before, but basically to regulate a body of water, you've got to have the state's authorization. From a municipality to regulate anything, we have to have the state's permission. So the legal advisor for my department and I met with FWC on several occasions and had good conversations with them because what you're required to do is get an ordinance passed first, then send it to the state, and then if they approve it, then you can proceed with the permitting process with FDEP, Pinellas County Waterways, State of Florida, Corps of Engineers, and so on. So for me, it seemed a little bit backwards. I get the ordinance passed first. Well, what if they don't like it? So if they don't like it, then I got to go back to council for an amendment, and it just seemed pretty cumbersome. So they were very helpful, have some good contacts in Tallahassee, and they helped us with a construct that looks like it will pass their scrutiny. So council passed that ordinance in November. So that was the first step in the process. We have a consultant on board to help shepherd this through the various regulatory agencies, and we're hopeful that we can get that done within about 6 months, the permitting component. At the same time, our staff is working to set up the markers and have them ready to deploy upon permitting approval. So, we'll get that component done. We can't, our equipment won't get into Stevenson's Creek effectively, so it'll be, likely be buoys as the regulatory markers in there, just because we can't get in there with a crane to drive piles. Yeah.
Is it possible to get a private company to do it? Because there's several dock companies that come in there. They just finished a dock across from me.
Yeah, we might cost that out just because of that.
Yeah, Priority Marine is one of them.
Yeah.
The guy lives in Island Estates that owns a company, and he's a decent guy. I'm sure you could get him to go in and.
Yeah, we've worked with a couple of those companies. I mean, we use them for certain things that we can't do. It's going to be a cost-benefit analysis. I mean, we can deploy the buoys ourselves. We have a team for that. We have the vessel to do it. It'll just be, we'll have to weigh the costs of what it would take a private contractor to do it versus our team deploying the buoys. So.
Well, my concern is if you put floating buoys, they have to be anchored. And when you're talking 3-foot water, versus, at low tide and 6-foot water. High tide, you're talking a cord going from 3 feet to 6 feet long. That thing's gonna drift around a lot. And the channel's already narrow, and, you gotta pretty much stay, the people that live, further up than I do, they have to pretty much stay in the channel.
Yeah.
So if that buoy's floating around, that's gonna be a navigation hazard.
Yeah, we're looking at it. We're very accustomed to deploying buoys. We have over 400 regulatory markers throughout the city that we're responsible for. So we're going to evaluate it and figure it out. We've got time to assess it and determine what's the best course of action. But yeah, if you have the scope necessary to cover, big tide swings, it will move some. We just have to see what will work up there. But I don't want to, I'll give you an example. Sometimes it's a couple grand to do a piling with a private contractor, and if I have to put 10 in there, and I don't,
Yeah, I understand that.
One other suggestion that you all probably know of anyway, but that Steve's commented, Gulfside Docks is, run by Paul Kelly, who obviously ran this board for many, many years, and I'm
Right.
sure would be sympathetic to helping. Had to move out of the city, which is why he's no longer
Sure.
affiliated. But in any event, there's multiple options for
Yeah,
guys that
yeah.
probably could do what Steve suggested.
Yeah, Mike has a Rolodex of folks that do this thing, and we were accustomed to working with them. So, that's not beyond the realm of possibility. Our equipment just can't get in there. So, for us to do it, it would require.
Yeah, you gotta have a crane that can lower down and go under the bridge and
Yeah, that bridge is a challenge, so,
just raise it.
yeah. I don't need another project.
I'd love you to raise both of them.
Yeah, that's somebody else's project. But it's a
Yeah, I
challenge.
got you.
So that's another bit of good news that, we're chipping away at these significant projects that were obstacles.
Yeah, I did have a question on that. So, another 6 months, what is it that makes it take that long? Just getting meetings with the appropriate
So-
people?
So
getting them-
you have to have your design, you have to sometimes do seagrass surveys. It depends on the requirement of each regulatory agency. And then you submit it, they provide comments, it comes back. And when you're dealing with large bureaucracies, these things take time. I think I've mentioned to you guys previously that, when I was at the PD, there was a lot of discussion over Stevenson's Creek, and the thought was, we'll just go put in we can regulate that locally, and we'll put in some markers. It's much more complicated than that. And that's what takes time, is we submit it, wait for a response. And some of these entities take months to respond. And that's just kind of the nature of what you're dealing with. I'm used to moving much quicker, but it just doesn't work that way. So, same thing with any of our regulatory markers. There's an approval process for all of them, even to reset them. You just got to get authorization, and then if it's a significant departure, you got to get a new permit. So, it's a
All right,
challenge.
thank you.
Similar boat ramp. So we had a failure out there of the gangway connecting one of the launch ramps back this summer. And we engaged with the engineering department to do a condition survey of all of those because, I got some public comments that, I'll come out with my, heliarc welder and I'll fix it for you. It's much more complicated than that. The cast connectors that were in the concrete have failed. Well, you can't just fix those, you have to replace these things. The last activity I saw, so we all know that the parking lot was redone and the $1 million bathroom was put in, but the ramps themselves weren't addressed, and they were last done in '97. So they're beyond their useful life. We've got to look at what it will take to replace the concrete piers and then the gangways and the floating dock systems. Unfortunately, this has come at a cost of adding the amenity of the floating parallel dock on the west side of the marina by the ramps by the fish cleaning table. There was a proposed parallel dockage. So, our priority is the functionality and the safety of one of the heaviest used launch facilities in the county. So this is going to take some time. We got a condition survey. next we have to get costs, and we have to find a contractor to do it. But I suspect it'll require full demo of those concrete piers, replacement of the concrete piers, replacement, fabrication of the floating docks and the gangways, and then reinstallation. So what we're going to do, and I don't know, the crews we're evaluating, we're going to pull the piling on the failed system. We've got it covered up with tape because people keep trying to use it. We've got barricades and tape, but they just move them out of the way and try and use it anyway. It's just not safe. So we're going to remove the whole floating structure and the gangway, and then be able to secure it with a single bolt, because the issue is actually, the connection. So we're going to work on that, have the crew get out there, pull the thing, drag it out of there, so it's not an attractive nuisance, if you will. But so that's going to take some time.
This sounds like a 6-month to 12-month
Yeah,
issue.
I would suspect about a 12-month project, because we've got to get the designs done, then we got to find a contractor, and then the permitting. Now, we should have some exemptions because they're existing, just so long as we don't get crazy and add significant footprint or anything like that. My desire is they've been functional for all these years, just replace them as they exist now, unless there's a better design that helps for the longevity.
Where does the money come from to support that area? Is that from your
Yeah,
marina
so-
activities or elsewhere?
So we're responsible for the overwater structures, the bathroom and things like that. This is a partnership with the parking department. So the revenues go to them, but any significant projects, we can access, Marine and Aviation can access those funds to make improvements there. There's also some money allocated for that floating dock system that I think it's prudent to fix what we have rather than add an amenity. So I'm going to talk to finance a little more about that and determine, and I think some penny money is potentially involved there. If that's the case, it is an infrastructure, it's a public access ramp, and that would be an appropriate use for those funds. So I'm looking to pursue that angle because it's going to be expensive. There's just no way around it. And I tend to be pretty pragmatic about these things. I'd rather fix what we have and make sure that it's completely functional before we go adding anything else. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to add something new when we got to address what our existing problems are. Any questions on Seminole Docks? So I guess, if it's okay with Mr. Roman, roll into the director's report, and I'll just stay here. I just got a couple things I want to touch on. So our recent tropical systems did some significant damage to our buoy line out at Sand Key. So 300 feet from shore, from effectively Sand Key Park, down maybe 1.25 miles, we have 28 buoys in the water that are a slow speed idle zone for motorized vessels. And the last storm put the remainder of what we had up in the surf line and all over the beach. So we've collected all those, and I've coordinated with FWC, who issues the permits for them, and they've given us authorization to establish that zone. We got to do this right, and we've had to reset them too many times for my liking. So we ordered significant hardware and new buoy systems to try and put something out there that doesn't require the constant attention of our crews. We have a small crew that does this, and it's really, when you're dealing with 500 pounds of anchor systems, chains, buoys, surf conditions, you have to have, everything has to be just right, or it's not safe. You can see how quickly, if a crew's trying to deploy one of these things and they get fouled up in the lines, or, I mean, it's dangerous. So safety is my first priority, but I do have a system now. We've coordinated with some other municipalities, had some conversations about what's working and what's not, checked around to see who had displacement after the last significant storm, I think it was Ian, I think we're on the right track, and we've ordered upwards of $40,000 worth of equipment to reset these buoys, maybe even more than that. So it's going to take some time as well, but I've got the go-ahead from the state to reset them and then provide them with the new coordinates. But those exist, they're about roughly 300 feet from shore, and they provide a little bit of a buffer zone for people inside. Doesn't mean you can't go in there with motorized vessels. It's not an exclusion zone. It's just an idle zone inside there. So, that's been another project that we just don't want to have to keep going out there if we can avoid it. So we'll see. We've got our fingers crossed once we start deploying these things. We've received most of the materials. We're waiting on a few more things. And then we'll start rigging those for deployment. And then we got to have a weather window and calm seas and good conditions to do it. Little update on, so you guys are aware of the wave attenuators that we've been dealing with at the Harbor Marina for quite some time. Continued deterioration and failures. We have contractors and engineers that have, we've moved the project along to the point where the fabrication should start taking place in the next couple months of the new attenuators. And once that's complete, we'll inspect those in February, March, and they can be deployed within the next couple months and installed afterwards. So we have a contractor on board, we have engineers on board, but we had some additional failures of more attenuators in the South Basin, this time on the northwest corner, related to some storm activity. So now we had to hire an engineer to evaluate that and see if they were storm related, and we've made an application to FEMA to address those. These things are ridiculously expensive. The three of them with design and installation are over $2 million, $2.5 million. I suspect the same will be true with the 3 or 4 on the northwest corner.
Is this the actual concrete floating dock
Yeah.
itself that the boats get tied to? Okay.
Yes, so what the attenuators are, they run the perimeter of that marina, and they're just heavier, deeper. For all appearances, they look like a floating dock. They just have more mass to them
Right.
to absorb the sea conditions. And then the idea being that you can still tie to them. Some of the larger vessels on the outside tie to those, but it reduces the wave activity within the marina. So they're a critical component of it. These things went in 2010, and we're having failures to the degree that, I've expressed this to council. I have engineering on board now because of the progressive nature of these. This is going to be a long-term project, and we've already have a design team looking at a multi-year overarching maintenance plan and replacement plan. And I think we're going to be doing this for quite some time. There's 30 of those things out there. And I've worked with finance and city management. We've allocated some funding for this, but it just appears that they didn't contemplate at the time of design the sea conditions that they were actually going to face out there. And then some of the materials they use are galvanized steel instead of stainless steel or aluminum, and those are decayed significantly. And the corrosion is so bad that it is creating other problems, concrete spalling and things like that. So the replacement that we're undergoing now, the 3 attenuators on the southwest corner, we've specified stainless steel, aluminum, and things that are more resilient in the corrosive environment. So it's a big challenge. It's going to be ongoing. It's going to be an ongoing maintenance challenge for us. And we want to be proactive, and I found myself coming in and being reactive to try and get these things sorted out. particularly with Imagine coming online in July. You know, that marina, I think, is going to get a lot of additional use, particularly for the day slips and the transient slips. Because when significant events are happening, people are going to want to bring their boat down there to see it. And I think it's going to get much busier, and as such, we got to make sure it's up to the task. So, big challenge. I'll be talking to you about it over and over again. You know, we have a maintenance master plan that we're going to have completed by the design team and engineering team, so that we can kind of establish a budget and look at that going forward. The problem you have is that, you know, the revenues generated aren't enough when you talk about these ridiculously expensive components. You know, to address 150 feet of the 1,400 feet of dock for $2.5 million, you can extrapolate out and see how expensive that is. And, you know, our revenues down there, we don't sell fuel or anything, it's just dockage, and they're around $900,000 a year. So you quickly eat that up with these huge capital maintenance projects. So it's just something to have on your radar and be aware of. There's really no great solution to it. I think when Imagine comes online, we will be raising rates down there a little bit, you know, consistent with what the market will bear. But still, it really doesn't address the elephant in the room, and that's the you know, significant expense of these capital maintenance problems. We got to answer any questions about that one. I probably should have started with that and ended with that.
Yeah, that's right.
Gone
Leave you
back
guys
to the
feeling-
beginning and started over with it, but that's not.
Yeah, but it's, you know, it's the conditions we find ourselves dealing with, and you got to take it head on, and you got to address the problems, and, you know, with the understanding that is a key component of Imagine, in my view. I mean, I'm biased, of course, because of my department, but I think that's going to be activated significantly with Imagine.
I do have a real quick question. So, you know, it's obviously segmented. So is the design currently such that it's easy if one segment needs to be replaced, that it can be easily pulled out, and, you know, wiring and all that stuff and plumbing hook? Is it, you know, like quick disconnect, so to speak, or is it?
No, they didn't design it that way, you know, to be kind of compartmentalized. So what makes it complicated is these you know, these piles are 80 feet long, you know, 36-inch diameter. I mean, so it's big, heavy components. So it's not an easy task. And then when they reset new piles, they've got to be mindful of, you know, the distance from the old pile, and so there's not some destabilization. So we quickly learned that it's much more complicated. It looks relatively straightforward. You know, they're floating segments. It's just,
It's the size of them, I got it.
it's much more complicated. I will say that something came up just that made me think about it. So Environmental Advisory had concerns over the increased boating activity and anchoring for Imagine events, and then the damage that might do to seagrass. Fortunately, I think this is really addressed by the fact that the marina takes up the entire frontage down there, because you can't anchor within 150 feet of a marina. So it may be, while a legitimate concern, I think that the fact that you can't do that will preclude that activity in proximity to the marina, which in effect covers that frontage. So we're going to monitor that. I'm going to be in communication with CPD on kind of trying to stay on top of that, because you can see we have a big 4th of July event and 500 boats show up and everyone wants to pitch their anchors over. That'll be a challenge for us, and a challenge for our tenants trying to get in and out of the marina, and that's why you can't.
Some boaters just anchoring is a challenge with
Yeah.
50 other boats around.
Yeah. So we're gonna continue to monitor that, and I've been in correspondence with city management over that topic. So that's just a little something that came up recently in the last couple of days. Okay. If you don't have any more questions, I'll
Thank you, Eric.
let you guys
All right.
do your thing.
All right, well, that concludes director's report. So board members to be heard. I think, Gina, you had something you wanted to bring up?
Well, he had mentioned something about the seawall, the seawall issues that will be addressed. I had a question as far as how often are these seawall issues inspected?
So, I don't know when that was last inspected, other than it was inspected as part of our design work on the marina. And they felt that, you know, there were sections that needed immediate replacement and immediate attention. But in terms of a city seawall inspection, I don't know the timetable. I mean, we can certainly take a look at that and see.
It seems when we started talking about this years ago, the seawall technically hadn't gotten to the end of its projected life, which I believe was 50 years. Because of other delays in the project, the ability to rebuild that, the time's gotten closer and closer to saying now we can replace it because it's reached its useful life. I think when they started the project, there was 5 years between when they planned on building the marina and when the useful life of it. And there's certain environmental and other rules that say you can't replace your seawall every 10 years or 20 years, it's 50 years. And I think now we're closer to that we can even incorporate it, because it didn't seem like it was even, they talked about it, they said, and we'll do it this way because then in 6 years, we're gonna have to replace seawall, or in the next 10 years. So now they're getting closer and closer of when this will be done and when this will be due, so why not cut the costs and do it all at once? Am I close on that?
You're absolutely correct on that. It was going to be about 10 years after the project. They're going to come back and replace the seawall. This original scope before this new, build the new seawall, was they were going to go in there and fix some tiebacks, and they were going to do some repairs on some of the existing seawalls.
Maybe even extend it a little bit, but
Yeah.
6 years later, sitting on this board, you see like 6 years has gone by, let's get it all done.
Yeah.
So,
think
I
that's
mean,
where it's
the last inspection I'm aware of was September 2020, and there were like, how many, 38 issues that needed to be tweaked. So your project is taking these issues into account, assuming
Yeah,
they
it's-
weren't already fixed?
It's about 1,300 feet, maybe more, of total seawall along that perimeter. And we didn't, knowing that we would have to do it in now probably a 5-year window, it just didn't make sense because of the disruptive nature of dealing with that. And we have so much commercial activity and recreational activity out of that marina, the thought of doing this all over again in a short window, because by the time we get this built, now we're looking at 3 years, we gotta start design, it just didn't make sense. It made much more sense and much more efficient and cost effective to do it all now, knowing what we know. And there's segments of it that they couldn't inspect because it was covered up with so many dock structures and stuff. So there was pieces they couldn't even look at. And it's the original seawall from, we suspect, 51.
Oh, wow.
So it's pretty old. But as far as inspections go, engineering does that with bridges and seawalls. Right now, there's a pedestrian bridge at the northeast corner of the marina. They're doing significant seawall repairs underneath there now because of an inspection report. So they do have a timetable for it, I just don't know what it is.
Okay.
Okay. Steve?
Okay, so one thing I just wanted to make a comment is that, you know, regarding the no-wake zones, the jet skiers lately, I mean, it's just been insane, the number of jet skis that are coming, doing 40 miles an hour underneath that bridge, and I just want to reiterate how important it is that something's...
Yeah, I mean, that's why I leaned into this and...
Yeah, I get you. Okay, so another thing that's, and it's not just in Stevenson Creek, it's other places too, but that's where I notice it because I kayak it and canoe it and things. There's a significant number of docks that are deteriorating and falling into the water. And I've complained to code enforcement and never even hear back from them. And this stuff starts floating around. I mean, we're talking wood, so it ends up floating around. And I personally hit, a large 2x6 with my boat one time and had to drag it and home and put it to the garbage. It was, 8 foot long, covered in barnacles, and probably weighed 100 pounds because it was so soaked up with water. And this stuff is just deteriorating and floating away, and nobody's fixing it. And I would think that the property owners should be able to be held accountable for either fixing it or take it out.
Yeah. So, I mean,
And I don't know if that's something that this group is supposed to even talk about or deal
Well-
with, but it's marine related, so.
well, we're not regulatory, obviously, in terms of that.
Yeah.
That's not what my department does. That would fall under code, was the thing originally permitted. I'm assuming that if it's in a deteriorated condition, they may address that, but I can't speak for code.
Let me comment on this, because this is a point that personally strikes home. And I'm wondering, it may not be a subject for this board, but I'm just wondering, what do you do about something like this? So on my own dock, I've noticed, I've got a big beam, I don't know what it is, 2 by 10 or something or other, it's 8 or 10 feet long, it's a big piece. It was there years and years and years ago when the dock was originally built. Since then, I've had something built over it, so this board is meaningless now. But it's come attached on one side, and it's kind of floating on the other side. It's way too heavy for me to just get in there and get it out. You can't get a commercial guy right now. They won't come and do a job like that. That takes 45 minutes. They want to come and build an entire dock, or they won't do anything. So what do you do? I mean, it's not the city's responsibility, I guess, but I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, I mean, we consistently, our crews will pick up this stuff we find floating, we had, I think about a 5 by 8 foot section of someone's dock at the, up on the boat ramp at, the rec center on the beach after one of the storms. So it's an ongoing problem. And to me, it's no different, unfortunately, than these derelict vessels everywhere, and I think we're all seeing a proliferation of those things.
Crazy. Yeah, and I can see storm damage that happens, and it'll take out stuff that wasn't quite there, but when it's literally been 2-3 years and it's, there's, in one case, there's a picnic, like one of those concrete tables that's, it's fallen in with it, and of course, that's not good for the water to have all this garbage and things like that in there, and, it just.
Since the commercial guys won't address this, is it even possible if we paid, obviously? You have crews that would do things like that, or is that not possible for a private guy to come hire a city crew to come take a board away or whatever?
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to do that for sort of.
It's got to get ripped out and start floating somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it would be beyond the scope of what we'd be able to do, but I think, and to your point, I mean, it is a problem, and people, and whether it be a dock or, their fence, people sometimes neglect those things. And then,
Well, the difference is the fence isn't gonna float around in the water and
Right.
have a boat hit it and tear off their outdrive.
yeah,
Or
Be good
damage.
enforcement for some of those jet ski speeders.
Yeah. So, okay, so that was one thing. Two, they're building those condos there just at the end of where Stevenson Creek meets Edgewater. And they're advertising that they're putting in a marina. My wife and I we were down in the model center, and the girls right there said to us directly that they're putting a marina, and they've got it depicted in their website, they've got it depicted in their model if you go into their model home center. And I've spoken to several people at the county that do the permitting. I don't remember their names. I think one is Dave. He's the main guy because I've dealt with him with my own stuff. He said they've already told them there's no way there's going to be a marina there because they won't let them permit it. So, but there are buoys. Somebody put in what looks to be crab pot buoys, but they're not crab pot buoys, and they're in a rectangular pattern there. I don't know what those are. I can't find out from anybody. They're kind of in the channel. I'm not sure they should even be there. And, but you can't get any answers from anybody. So, and again, I don't know if that's part of our purview in this or not, but I'm bringing it up because I don't know who else to talk to because nobody seems to respond to me.
it's come up before, and I've had this conversation with a couple people. There is no permit for a marina there. I've not seen anything related to a permitted marina. They're selling boat slips that they don't have, and I don't.
Yeah, you're aware of that. They're
Yeah.
selling boat slips.
Yeah, I mean, I've been told that. I haven't verified it myself. I've seen the renderings on the website. But ultimately, I am part of that process when docks get permitted, then I review it as the harbor master. I've not seen anything, it's not in the queue, I don't know, I've checked with the county, I've checked a couple different angles, and there is no marina, and the depictions show it actually in the bay. The depictions of the marina show it in you know, facing west in the actual bay.
Well, the pictures show it inside of the first bridge.
Yeah, the one I saw had it outside.
Oh, did it? Yeah.
So I
And it shows boats that are too big that could never get into the bridge. That's
yeah.
what
Of course.
I sent them an email, in fact, and I never got a response. They're just being dishonest, but so to the best of your knowledge, there is no intention of letting them put a marina there.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I've not seen anything that would lead me to believe they're pursuing that, or if they did at some point in time, it may have been a non-starter, so I don't know. I mean, and I can't speak to their business practice of selling something.
Yeah, that's a civil thing, I get it. Yeah. So then the last thing, and so there's people fishing from these bridges, and I've gotten fishing line in my own boat, and you can't see it, and you tell the guy, hey, I'm coming through here, and they don't care. And they're not supposed to be fishing from these bridges, but nobody seems to want to do about it, and it's a hazard to people kayaking, because you can't see these lines, you can get yourself hooked, and I've gotten my boat hooked before, and so, I don't know if there's anything you can do from this angle, or we can do from this angle, but nobody seems to care about it, and there's plenty of other places they can fish. Downtown at the main marina, there's a whole section, and there's other places that are designated to fishing that, something.
If it's posted as such, you can call CBD and they can come out and, get that.
They take so long, we've done it, they take so long that by then the person's gone, or they come out, talk to the guy and leave and let him continue. It seems like just let them do it kind of thing. So, especially the one that goes across, that's basically where Fort Harrison heads to Dunedin. I mean, there's people throwing cast nets off there and they don't see you coming, and I beat my horn, and, it's gonna cause a problem at some point. So anyway, just wanted to put all that stuff out there.
Okay,
That's it.
thank you. Are there any comments from any other board members?
I just thought of something since we're kind of
Alright.
talking about Stevenson's Creek. I live on Betty Lane's side. Is there anything that we could do to kind of like encourage a cleanup or some kind of a quality control in that area? Because as expressed before, there's like tree branches falling in there, there's clothes, trash in there.
So the city's, done some significant cleanups in there, particularly around some of the transient camps that were built up in the mangroves. So if those come to the city's attention, we have a team that goes out and does that cleanup. And they did some significant cleanup in there within the last year or so. We're talking tons of trash. And even our crews, when we can get to things, we got a report of some tires in there. If we can get to them, we can pull them. The challenge is, and this goes back to my canine days, I tracked somebody on several occasions through that thing. And if you get in that mud, you'll go up to your waist. So it's really an accessibility problem to get in there and try and extricate some of that stuff. It's not a waterway we would maintain. The upper reaches of that creek is very narrow. And we just don't have the access, so we wouldn't be cutting fallen branches out or anything like that. Because it's, for all intents and purposes, it's not considered a navigable waterway when you get in those areas, because it's so narrow. Like I said, I've logged through there on a couple occasions, and you go right down to your waist in the mud.
And just so you know, there's a group of people that do cleanups there. In fact, the girl that coordinates those was at the last meeting with another guy that I know him, so he's went to high school with me. And so she does cleanups a couple times a year, but they don't go all the way up. They focus on just that lower basin. And I've told them several times that it would be helpful if they can get their groups to come up to the next stages, because that's where the garbage is. It just floats back and forth. Some of it's 20 years old. We get stuff into our yard that's literally been there for 20 years, you can tell. But it goes up and down with the tides and things like that, so there's still a lot of garbage there, so.
Okay, well, if there are no other comments, I think we are completed. So we will go ahead and adjourn in record time.